Hello everyone and welcome to Azam Shah Weekly. This video is brought to you by my new course SwiftData Bootcamp, a comprehensive guide to building data-driven applications. Now this is a 9+ hours course on SwiftData framework. Let's go ahead and check out the contents. You can see there's a special pricing going on. The regular price is $119, but you can get it for just $89 if you buy it before 14th of December. Now, check out the syllabus over here. We're going to start with the new SwiftUI state management changes. Then you're going to go into getting started with SwiftData. Always good idea to just get started with something, right? So I'm going to go ahead and show it to you how you can do that. Then you're going to learn about one-to-many relationship, many-to-many relationship, understanding queries, dynamic queries, and also static queries, versioning, migration, persisting changes or like genre and filtering based on genre, which are enums, and also transformable properties, like if you want to store some complex object like UI color, how do you do that? Testing, very important topic, I'm going to cover that. Syncing with iCloud using CloudKit, also integrating SwiftData with UIKit applications, and then storing binary data using SwiftData. So images, how to store images in SwiftData, and also migrating core data apps to SwiftData. So that's a lot of content, 9+ hours of content that you can get. Make sure to check out this course. The link will be right there in the YouTube description. So hopefully you'll enjoy the course, and thank you so much. Now let's go back to the video. So let's go ahead and see that what you will be building in this section. You'll be learning about how to store binary data. In our case, it will be images in SQLite data store using SwiftData. So if I go ahead and run it on a simulator and select a particular image, you will see that that particular image will be stored in our database. Now I have the option of selecting the image from a photo library, or if I'm running it on a real device, I can always use the camera and take a picture. You will also be learning about how the data is actually stored behind the scenes. So there's a separate lecture which is going to cover all of that fun stuff. We'll be looking into how SwiftData is storing the information when you simply store the data, meaning just as binary data. And we'll be looking at how SwiftData stores the data when you are storing it in external storage using one of the attributes available in SwiftData. So we'll be looking at all of that fun stuff. So make sure you check out this lecture also. It's going to be coming later in this section. So there you have it. Storing binary data into the SQLite data store using SwiftData, and that is exactly what we'll be learning in this section. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and talk about the starter project. And the reason that I'm giving you the starter project is because the part of saving a binary, meaning image in this case, is very small. It's all revolves around getting the actual image, converting it to the data, which is more of a UI related thing. So instead of developing and investing time in implementing the whole UI, which you can learn anywhere, we are going to start with a starter project which already contains all of the UI related elements. So we can just focus on storing the images in our SwiftData or using SwiftData framework. So let's get started. We'll go over a couple of these things to see what's going on. So you can see that we have a content view and we have a select a photo button as well as a camera button. The UI is not that important. You can create much better UI if you want. That's perfectly fine. The main thing is that we're just trying to see how can we save an image which is selected from a photo library, and also how to save an image that is selected from an actual camera in our SwiftData using SwiftData. So over here we're using the photos picker, And Photos Picker is already one of the controls that is part of the Swift UI framework. So you can simply use Photos Picker, which will allow you to pick a photo from your photo album. For picking a picture from the camera, I'm using my own custom view, which is called the image picker. And the image picker is implemented in a separate file. This is the image picker. You can see the image picker is actually using UI image picker controller, which is coming from UI kit, UI or foundation. And we can use that to kind of bridge the gap between picking an image from the camera. We also do have some extension functions like helper functions on the UI image. And one of those, and the only one, is resize. Basically, you can pass in a size that you want your image to be, and it's going to simply resize that. If you run the application again, or right now, and click on select a photo, you can see that it shows all of these different things. You can select a photo, it just goes away. It doesn't really do anything because we haven't really written any line to save the data. The camera portion is only going to work when you are actually connected to your physical device, and then you can run that. Or else right now, it's not going to really do anything. It actually crashes, right? So we need to fix that part also. We don't really want our thing to crash when you simply press on the button. That's never a good idea. All right, so these are the things that we'll have to take into account. So this is our starter project. Whenever you are selecting a photo from a photo library, the handle selected photo item gets fired, and we actually get the data and simply print out the data. This is the binary data. We simply print it out. Whenever you are selecting from the image picker, our selection.image gets changed, which again fires the onChange event, which is this one, and it calls handle selected photo album, which is the same function that we looked at. But this time the selected or this photo item will be null because we didn't really select from the photo album, we selected from our camera. So it's going to go to the else block. It's going to get the selection as an UI image. It's going to get the PNG data and then simply print it out. So nowhere in the code it is going to save it to SQLite, which is kind of like a default storage for SwiftData. So SwiftData is not even present in our application, and that's the part that we need to implement, right? Okay, so in the next lecture, we will be performing our implementation. We will create some sort of a model that we can use so that we can save data using SwiftData framework to SQLite. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so in the last lecture, we did a tour of the existing code. You can see that the existing code is more about the user interface and selecting picture or a photo from a photo library as well as a camera. But we still have to figure out how to store the selected photo into SQLite database, which is the default store, using SwiftData. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder, a new group, and I will call it models. And let's say that we're working on an application that is taking pictures or selecting pictures for furniture. So I'm going to go ahead and create a particular model, and I'll call it furniture. All right, this is just obviously an example. You can, once you learn how to store images, you can use anything you want. So first thing, I'm going to go ahead and import SwiftData because I want to use SwiftData. And the class will be furniture. And we are going to decorate this with the model attribute so that we know that this class will be persisted using SwiftData. Now you can add any parameters or any properties that you want, I'm just going to go ahead and add a single property over here, and I'll call it data. All right. And we will create the initializer also. There you go. And that's pretty much it. That's our furniture class. It only contains one single property called photo. And the important part over here is that the photo type is not like a string or integer. It's data, because we will be storing binary data to the database. So make sure it is data. Now there are some attributes that you can put on over here. All right, so I'm just going to say we will take a look at attributes later. All right, so I know that we can put some attributes whenever you are storing something in the database. We will take a look at it a little bit later. Don't worry about it too much right now. Okay, so this is great. We have our furniture class. Let's go to the app file, because in the app file now we can register our model container. So model container for, we only have one, so I'll just say furniture.self. That's it. If you want to register that for your previews, you can also do that. Just go to your actual view, scroll down, and you can register your actual views over here, or the model container for the views. So I can go ahead and wrap this into navigation stack, and I can do the same thing so that it will work on the previews also. Obviously, when you're selecting a photo from a device, from a camera, or you want to take a picture, that's really not going to work on the previews. So make sure that you understand that you have to run it on a real device when you're taking a picture from a camera. All right. So this is all good. The next thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that when you basically are saving, it saves it into the database. For that, I'm just going to go ahead and create a separate function. I'll call it save furniture. All right. With, and then we can say image data. So you're going to pass in the data over here. All right. Now, should this function be over here, or should we move this out to somewhere else? Well, since this is our only view that's going to use it, right now, at this moment, it is fine to have this function right inside our content view. And once again, the views in SwiftUI are view models, but that does not mean that you should just put everything inside the view model or the view itself, right? So when the time comes, we can go ahead and create an extra layer, maybe an observable object if needed. But right now, I don't really see any need for creating an observable object. You can create like a helper function or a wrapper if you need to, so that you can use it in other different places. Like maybe you can call it furniture.save, and like you can create a function right over here. That's fine too. All right. But we're just going to keep it super simple, because we're just trying to learn how to select a photo and then save it in the database and display it. All right, so you can see that the parameter that we're passing over here is image data, and that is of type data. We are going to construct over here a UI image. Now, you might say, well, hold on, why are we constructing a UI image? Isn't the data what we need? And that's true. I mean, data is the thing that you actually need, but keep in mind that whenever you select an image from a photo library, or whenever you select it from the camera, I mean, those photos are pretty big, depending on the settings that you have, but they are megabytes and megabytes. Sometimes they can be like 5, 6, or 10 megabyte, right? If you have a good phone and you are taking pictures, those can be very, very big. So the reason that we are converting it to a UI image is so that we can resize them. So let's go ahead and resize them. And I'll say UI image dot resize. And this is where our extension function that we created comes into play, the resize to function. Now, you can resize it to anything you want. Obviously, in our case, in my case, it doesn't really take into account the aspect ratio. So I'm just going to resize it to any width that I want. So, but make sure that if you are resizing it, you have to take into account that the aspect ratio itself. But I'm not really going to do that. I'm just going to say 200 by 200, and it's going to go ahead and give me the resized image. All right. Once we have the resized image, then we again need to get back to the data because that's what we want to store. So the UI image does contain a function PNG data, which is going to give you the data. And now we have the resized image data, which will be much smaller. Next, we can create the furniture. And as you can see, the furniture does take a photo, which is of type data. And this is where we can go ahead and send resize image data. Now, in the previews, we are injecting our model container for furniture.self. That's the only model that we have. And we can access the model context from the environment values. Once we have access to the model context and we have the furniture, all we need to do is to simply say context.insert and then simply go ahead and insert the actual model, which is furniture. And that's the end of the save function. But the save function is currently not really being fired anywhere. So let's go back to the handle selected photo. And we're going to focus on this area right there because this is the one that's going to get fired when you select a photo from a photo album. So right now when we get the photo, when we select a photo, it gives you the data, which is great. We unwrap it and we don't really do anything with it. You can see that it simply goes and, it doesn't really do much. That's basically it, right? So what can we do with our image data? Well, once we have the image data, how about we call save furniture over here and pass in the image data? There we go. The same thing can be done for when you select a photo from the actual camera. And over here we can go and we can say save furniture. And then we can also pass in image data. Great. The other thing that we want to do is, remember we created this struct, or this was already available to you, and that contains two different properties: photo item, which is photo coming from the photo album when you select it using the picker control, and the image, which is just an image itself. And we created this selection in our content view. So whenever, since it's a struct, whenever this selection changes, it actually fires the onChange event, which is right here. And in our photos picker, we were passing in selection dot photo item. So whenever this changes, it's going to eventually fire onChange, which is great. But we also did that for the image when we were passing it from the actual camera using the image picker, which is a custom control. And that's also going to fire the onChange and eventually call handle selected photo item. Now, whenever you're done with selecting the photo from the photo album or selecting or saving the furniture, based on when you selected it from an actual camera, we do want to make sure that our selection, which is our the actual struct, is initialized again. There we go. And we can do the same exact thing over here also. And the reason that we want to do that is we want to kind of like reset this. Because if we don't reset this part, then the photo item or the selection.image, these both can have values that will never go away. So once you select a photo from a photo item or a photo album, once you select it and saved, let's reset it. Once you go ahead and take a picture, let's reset it. All right, let's go ahead and build it. Okay, now we can go ahead and try it out. Now, one of the things I also can do over here, and just for the previews, is I can go ahead and pass in memory true, so that all the data that we are saving will be in the memory and not persisted. This can be good for testing, this can be good for previews, because you don't really want to save the data when and then you will have like a lot of data being saved and persisted in the previews. So in memory is fine for the previews, but you can see that in our actual application, when you run the app and not the previews, we're not really using in memory because we do want those things to be persisted. Okay, let's go back. For photo album or photo library, we can just select it right from the preview. Another thing to note is, and in your starter project you already have that, if you go to the info file, you should be able to see that we have added the privacy for the camera description. This basically means that we will be able to we will be able to use the camera. We may need an extra info.plist key when you're selecting it from the photo library. So make sure that you run it on the device, because right now there is no key that is telling you that you will be able to select from a photo library, just the camera itself. All right, so always a good idea, obviously, to check it on the real device. Let's go ahead and click on select a photo. Now we have these couple of photos over here that we can select just for checking, and since these are stored in memory, that's good, it's going to go away. So it's got selected, but we don't really know. I mean, there's no way to tell that they're selected. Now, wouldn't it be nice if there's a way to display the photos? I mean, that's the whole point, right? Whenever you select a photo from a photo library or from a camera, it should display it on the screen so it makes sure that it's selected. So let's go to the next lecture and find out that how we can display our photos. Now let's go ahead and see that how we can display our images that are stored in the database. Now again, since it's a display part, you can use any kind of an interface that you want. I think when you're displaying images, it might make sense to display them in a grid. Again, it depends on the scenario. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and create a columns which will consist of 3 different columns. So this is using the grid item which is already available in SwiftUI. We're going to create a spacing of 10 between each of these grid items. Once we have the grid items, we also want the ability to fetch all the data from the database. And the good thing is that we can always use the query. And we can perform a query. We could say furnitures, which will be an array of furniture. And we'll start with nothing. Basically, it's going to be empty. Now we can move on to our body and try to see that if we can display all the furnitures. Again, the use and the choice of which UI element you're going to use to display the images is completely up to you. I'm just going to go ahead and go with lazy V grid, but if you want to use something else, that's perfectly fine too. We're going to be passing in the columns. There we go. And for the content, we will have to go through furnitures. This is going to be returning from the database. We will get access to the furniture. Now, furniture in this case, you can see furniture does have a property called photo, but that photo property is of type data and it's also optional. So if it's optional, then in those cases, we don't really want to do anything. All right. So I'll say if let furniture photo. So we're going to unwrap this into furniture.photo. Now this is a photo, which basically means it's basically data. Now we can't really display data. We need to convert it to an image. So now we can go ahead and say UI image. We're going to convert it passing in the data, which will be furniture photo. And once you do that, we can use the image to display it. You can see that the image does take into account the UI image. So the image view in SwiftUI takes in the UI image. We already have the UI image, so we can display that. If you want to go ahead and resize it, you can resize it. And if you want to set the aspect ratio, you can make it fit or fill depending on your choice. Now let's go ahead and add a photo. Okay, it's displaying. Let's go ahead and select some other photos. Okay, so that looks great. It looks like it's working correctly. The next thing that we want to do is we want to also check that what if we run the app on a real device? Can we take a picture? And also from the real device, will we be able to select a photo from a photo library? So let's go ahead and try to run it on a real device and see if we can do that. So here you go. I'm going to launch the app on the real device, select a photo from my photo library, and it appears and it stores in the database. Now I'm going to use the camera to take a picture, and then you will see that that photo also appears and saves into the database. So our work is done. We are able to save binary data into the database. But don't you remember that I told you that we are going to look at the attributes that you can put on your properties, which are under your model class? Well, we are. And before we do that, we also want to see kind of like behind the scenes of how the information is stored in the database. Now, if you noticed over here in the output window, we have all these log statements. Some of them are SQL commands, and some of them will show you where the actual data is being stored. So what we want to do is we want to look at the actual database and see that how these things are being stored. And you can always enable the core data debug. I know it's SwiftData, but SwiftData uses core data behind the scene. You can always enable this debugging log. If you go to the scheme, you just click on Edit Scheme, and you can see that on the arguments passed on launch, we are passing this argument. So if you pass this argument, and there are some other arguments that you can pass, but that's the minimum that you need, then on the output window, it's going to log everything. If you run an insert, if you are doing some sort of a fetching, then it's going to do all of those different things. You can actually see that it is showing you what SQL commands are getting executed. And we actually covered that a little bit earlier on, that how to enable debugging in SwiftData. So using this approach, we will be able to see that what happens behind the scene and how SwiftData is storing binary information into the database. So let's go ahead and debug what's going on behind the scene. We want to see how SwiftData is storing this binary information. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the iPhone 15 or whatever the simulator is, because we're just going to run it on a simulator and see what happens. The next and the very important thing is you have to make sure that the edit scheme, you are passing these arguments. And I've actually mentioned this a number of times. If you put this particular key with a value 1, then it's going to enable the SQL debug, and it's going to show you into your output window what exactly commands you're executing, what SQL is being executed, and also a URL to the actual store so you can open it up in your favorite application, like the actual database. Let me go ahead and run the application. And again, it's going to be running it on the simulator because I just selected iPhone 15. So here we go. The application is running. You can already see some log information, which will be very helpful. That's fine. Now, since we're running it on the simulator, we can go ahead and select it from the photo album. And let's go ahead and select something. Okay, it displays. That's fine. Let's go ahead and select a couple of different things, a couple of different furnitures. Okay, great. Now, we want to see how SwiftData is storing this information in the SQLite database. So the first thing we need is, well, where is the database? And if you scroll up, you will be able to locate the database. Actually, if I simply clear this out, everything, just to make it a little bit more clear, let me go ahead and run this again. And we're not going to insert anything because 3 items are already inserted. But if you go on the top, that's the path of your store right there. Now there are many different ways of going to the store and opening up the database. I just want to use the tools that are built in. I don't want to install any new tools. So I'm just going to copy this path till application support, open up my terminal, put this path in the quotes, and now you can see that I'm already inside application support folder. Just make sure that you put the quotes also when you're pasting the path. If you want to use some other application like Base or Beekeeper or things like that, you can definitely use that also. Now I can see my store file, and that's the file that SwiftData is using to store, to persist all the information. And since I'm on the Mac, I can just use SQLite 3. This is already built in, meaning I don't really have to install anything to run SQLite 3. So I can simply say SQLite 3 and then the name of the store, which is default.store, or the name of the database, which is default.store in this case. Now you can see that I'm on the prompt for SQLite. So this is where I can run all the different SQLite commands. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in schema. Schema simply means show me all the tables and their types, all the columns and their types. And a lot of different tables over here, well, some of them are indexes, but there are a lot of tables like this one and this one. It's just that, core data or SwiftData, whatever you want to call it, they're just creating these tables for tracking something. You don't really care that much about these tables. You only care about the tables that we are looking for, which is the furniture. And this is our table. It's called Z furniture. Now you might be asking that, well, hold on a second, why is there a Z in front of it? Well, that's just how things work. That's just how core data is storing information. And once again, I'm saying core data because SwiftData behind the scene uses core data. Let's look at the different columns. We have primary key, we have ENT integer key, we have OPT integer, okay, and we also have this one, and that's the one that we are looking for, which is zphoto blob. So it's stored as a blob, all right? Now let's go ahead and run a query to see what's inside zfurniture. So this is where your SQL skills are going to come in handy. I can simply say select all from, and I can simply copy the name of the table. Now, the name of the table, it doesn't really have to be in uppercase letter. You can use lowercase or something, whatever you want, that's fine. Just make sure it's Z furniture and put a semicolon at the end. Now, when you run this command, you can see all of these different fields are integer, integer, integer. There are 2, 3, 1 and all the primary keys, that's fine. But the actual Z photo contains the actual PNG. So that's where the PNG is being stored, like the actual data is being stored. All right. So that's how we can debug that, okay, behind the scene, right now we're storing it as a PNG file. Well, like a data, like a blob, it's being stored directly into our main storage. Okay. Let's get out of this. Simply say exit, dot exit, and clear it out. Now, what if we go back to our furniture? And instead of saying over here that it's just simply photo, what if we decorate it with an attribute which is available in SwiftData, and we're going to go ahead and say external storage. Now there is an attribute, since I'm putting it over here, which is called external storage. Now this actually means that when SwiftData is storing information into the database, depending on the size of the photo. Now it can be, I don't know the limit, maybe it's 128 KB or it's 1 megabyte. If the picture, if the photo, if the data is more than that particular minimum size, then it's going to store it somewhere else, like in an external storage. Okay, so let's go ahead, and before I run this, I do want to clear up my app, meaning I want to delete my app, because now we're using a different way of storing it. So our app is not going to like it since we changed this part. Okay, let's go ahead and run this. So apart from changing this attribute or adding this attribute, we haven't really changed anything else. Let's go ahead and select something. And I'm going to select these pictures again. There we go. Great. Okay, so that's fine. It's been stored. I'm going to run it again because, you know, there's a lot of information over here. I don't really want to go through the output window to find the URL of how it is stored. So I'm just going to go ahead and run it again. And this is going to give me the URL that I need. Again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to try to find the URL. I think it might be a different URL or the same URL, but it might be different. So that's why I'm just grabbing that URL and going to go to that folder again. We're going to do the same exact steps. SQLite 3 default.store. Okay. Now we are using SQLite 3 and we are looking at that particular store. So on the prompt for SQLite, we can say schema. One thing to note about the schema is that even though we are using external storage, the schema has not really changed. It's still using the photo as a blob. Okay, that's fine. Let's go ahead and say select all from the furniture. We just want to see what's in the table, by the way. Well, that's kind of weird, right? Because this is different. It was not these UUIDs that was in the table. I mean, the last time we checked, let me see if I can actually go up. Yeah, last time we checked over here, we had PNGs. This means that the data, the blob was already stored in there. But this time what we're doing is still a blob, but these are maybe some sort of a reference point which links to the external storage. All right, so the blob type, or it is still a blob type, data type, but instead of storing the whole picture over there or the whole data over there, what we're storing is maybe small amount of data just to refer to it in external storage. So that's what we're doing. All right. Now, another cool thing that you will note that even though this is attribute external storage, if I run the application and in my photos, right now you can see that I have these photos, but what if I take a very small photo? I'm going to take a really small photo, like really small. There we go. And just put it over there. There we go. Got it? It's a very small photo. And what I'm going to do is select or save that photo. So now you can see that photo is appearing. It's just a black photo or whatever the background is. And now if we go and run this command again, select, then you can see that for the last one that we took, the photo, it's not storing a reference by giving it a UUID. It's actually, the photo is so small that it decided that, okay, I'm just going to store the actual photo in there without using external storage. So this kind of proves that there is some sort of a minimum threshold that your SwiftData is looking at, and if the picture goes over the threshold, then it gives it an external ID and stores it somewhere else, external storage. But if the picture is smaller in size, then it automatically stores the actual picture in the main storage. So that is how it is working. And it's kind of cool to see that what is going behind the scene. Now, if you're using CloudKit and syncing, all of this will automatically work, so you don't really have to worry about all of those things. But when you are working on the application, it is usually a good idea from performance perspective to use external storage so that if the images are or data is bigger, then they are offloaded to external storage. But if they're small, like we saw over here for our picture over here, right there, the black picture over here, the background, which is super small. I think it might be like only less than 10 KB or 5 KB. Then that part is stored right in the main storage itself without giving it a reference, without using external storage. So it's fun to see that how things are working behind the scene, and hopefully that will help you out when you are building much bigger applications. Thank you.